This has to be one of the most unique, underutilized training modalities in combat sports. And no, I'm not talking about medicine ball throws, which I still believe aren't used enough. But what I'm talking about is isometric training, but not just any isometric training. Long duration isometrics at long muscle lengths. But how does performing an exercise without movement make you potentially faster and more powerful? By the end of this video, you'll know why this potent stimulus should be added to your training program to make you the fastest athlete on the mat. But before that, today is the final day to get the early bird price for the Coach's Corner. It's a combat sports strength and conditioning coaches only community with monthly coach presentations, live chats, and research breakdowns. There's nothing else like it out there. So get in there now before the price goes up. But for you fighters, I haven't forgotten about you. Make sure you grab the free MMA and BJJ strength conditioning blueprints down in the description. I've got an epic Black Friday deal coming up for you. So if you grab those, I will send you that Black Friday deal this coming week. But back to our long duration isometrics. The main reason is the potential for increasing muscle fascicle length. And you've heard me harp on about this before, but this is important, so I'm going to highlight it again. Now, why does increasing muscle fascicle length matter? Through traditional strength training, we see a shift from the fastest muscle fiber types, our type 2X, to our type 2A muscle fibers. And I covered this research in a video not too long ago around the detraining effect for the overshoot phenomenon. You can check that out as well. But this shift, you're essentially reducing contractile velocity of the muscle, therefore you're reducing speed. However, type 2A muscle fibers are much more fatigue resistant, so this is likely a positive adaptation for combat athletes, since we need to go multiple rounds of 3+ minutes. But what if you still want lightning speed with that? That's not to say you can't get faster with the muscle fiber type shift, as we see changes in strength, speed, and power, regardless of muscle fiber type shifting. But if we want to take it to the next level, this is where muscle fascicle length comes in. Adding more sarcomeres in series or blocks of muscle fibers in a row increases contractile velocity of the muscle, potentially counteracting the high volumes of combat sports training or traditional strength training. And when I'm talking about counteracting those high volumes, I'm referring back to that shift to muscle fiber type. Now, there are many methods to achieve this increased fascicle length. For example, Blazevich in 2003 and with his colleagues found that the sprint and jump intervention group increased muscle fascicle length, while the strength group did not. Now, the strength group in this only squatted down to 90 degrees. If they squatted at full depth, potentially would see some changes in muscle fascicle length, in my opinion. Then we have Ramirez de la Cruz and their meta-analysis in showing increased muscle fascicle length from plyometric training. We also have an eccentric-only hamstring training study where they increased muscle fascicle length greater than concentric only training after 6 weeks, and that's by Timmons and his colleagues in 2016. So that covers sprinting, jumping, plyometric training, eccentric training, all stimulating this adaptation of increasing muscle fascicle length. But theoretically, long muscle length isometrics may provide a potent stimulus for increasing muscle fascicle length and therefore higher forces at faster speeds. The podcast being released tomorrow, you must listen to this. It is an epic podcast with Angus Ross, goes into the history of this method and how he came about identifying it as a potential speed and power builder. So make sure you tune in for that. It'll be released tomorrow morning on the Sweet Science Fighting podcast channel or on Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Also this week, I'm interviewing Bill Smart again. He'll be live on the channel and will be released the following week. And we'll be diving into this exact topic as well as others, as he's implemented this with Israel Adesanya and seen some pretty crazy results with that. So I'll let him share what's going on there on that podcast. So again, make sure you subscribe to those. But a couple of papers point to a potential mechanism for these long muscle length isometrics working. For example, Panady and their colleagues, hopefully I said that right, their meta-analysis in 2023 titled Muscle Architecture Adaptations to Static Stretching Training showed greater fascicle length increase with high versus low volume of stretching. Now, I've talked a lot about on various videos that static stretching is not going to give you the architectural change muscle length to make it permanent. Now, I gave a caveat in the previous video I did about that, and that is unless you're doing very extreme levels of volume and intensity, which this shows. So this meant longer intervention, so typically 10 versus 5 weeks, longer stretching time, 2.5 times longer stretching time during these stretching protocols, longer total stretching load, and higher stretching intensities. So you need to throw a lot at it if you're doing it by static stretching. And then taken to the extreme, 60 minutes of stretching 6 times per week. Yes, 60 minutes held essentially for the entire time. So being in a boot basically in that stretch position increases muscle fascicle length in these subjects, and that was found in a study by Warneke and their colleagues in 2022. Now, I would argue that going down the static stretching route to try and get these adaptations, you're going to lead to probably a lot of other negative adaptations that you do not want for performance. But it's to prove a point that being in these long muscle length positions under stress potentially allows us to have that muscle architecture change. But why focus on these long muscle length isometrics when we can get fascicle length changes from other means, like the ones I mentioned earlier, the eccentrics, the plyometrics, the jumps, the sprints? Well, the meta-analysis by Dustin Oranchuk, and I urge you to go back to the Sweet Time to Fighting podcast. I've done 2 podcasts with Dustin. He is the isometric guru, and his meta-analysis shows long muscle length isometrics are superior to short muscle length isometrics regarding hypertrophy, so building muscle, rate of force development, producing force quickly, and transfer better to athletic performance, which is a nice bonus from these kinds of isometrics. But where I see it is using these isometrics layers another potent stimulus on top of other training you're already doing. So if you're already doing plyometrics and accentuated eccentric training within your training program, adding long duration isometrics means you're forcing your body to adapt to this change. Plus, I would argue these long muscle isometrics are less intense than accentuated eccentric training in terms of having slightly less soreness and less fatigue. So there's always that to keep in mind as well. Plus, there are additional benefits. So like eccentric training, shifting the length tension relationship up and to the right, as shown by Brigalion and John Cronin in 2010. I've had John Cronin on the podcast, you can check that out. But essentially when we're shifting the length tension relationship, we're able to produce more force, or in this case, peak torque, because it's an angular force, because it's a rotational force, at longer muscle length. Now, Dustin Oranchuk in that paper I just referenced speculates the same relationship may exist between muscle length and a shift in the optimal angle following isometric contractions based on a study by Allegri, hopefully I said that right, and his colleagues, with 8 weeks of long muscle length isometric training, shifting length tension relationship up and to the right greater than short muscle length training. So shifting this relationship means you're producing more force at longer muscle lengths, which is an excellent way to reduce your risk of injury and also makes a good proxy for increases in muscle fascicle length. Further, we have research on isometrics providing an analgesic or numbing effect on the patella tendon. So this study by Rio and their colleagues in 2017 found 60-second isometric leg extension holds had a greater immediate pain reducing effect on the knees versus traditional concentric based leg extensions. So if you do suffer from some form of tendon pain, doing these at the beginning of your training session means you may be able to perform the movements you need to perform within your training without pain, therefore improving performance in your training. Plus, you're teaching your body to not have those pain signals when you're moving, potentially obviously over long term, starting to heal that injury. So how do you implement these long duration isometrics at long muscle lengths? Well, here are 4 examples you can try. I've got these from Bill and Angus. Some of them are basic and stuff that you may have done before and stuff I've talked about previously very, very long ago. But there are a couple of new ones in there that I really, really like and I'm going to show you. But the first one, the really basic one, the isometric split squat or isometric lunge, whatever you want to call it. But the goal is to have a very, very long stance. You want that front leg quite far forward and you want that rear leg not straight, but you don't want it at that full 90 degree like you're doing a split squat. You're going to be slightly longer. You'll feel a huge stretch in that rear leg hip flexor rectus femoris, and you also feel it in that front leg kind of hamstring glute area. Now the goal is not to hold these isometrics and just try and keep that position. This goes for all of them. The goal is to create tension. So with the split squat, we want to try and pull that front heel back, and we want to try and push that back knee forward, almost like a scissor action. Your legs aren't going to move, but you want to create that tension like you're trying to get them to move for the entire duration of that hold. And that's what makes this so killer. You can hold this position without doing that for 60 seconds. It will suck. It's not that bad. But creating that tension and doing that for 60 seconds sucks balls. And doing it to failure sucks even more balls. Bear that in mind that this is not something you can kind of just sit on. It's an active movement and it sucks. But you need to do these intense variations in order to elicit the adaptations that we want out of it. The next one's an isometric push-up position. Now we're going to do that on an elevated surface so we can get a larger range of motion and a bigger stretch on the chest, and that's creating that long muscle length. exactly the same instructions as the split squat. You're trying to almost bring your hands together or push against the plates, so you're activating your chest and you're not just relaxed in that bottom position. The third one, an isometric one arm hang. Now this one is basically a modified side bend if you don't have a back extension. If you have, say, a 45-degree back extension, you could do like a lateral, like an oblique hold or crunch. So you'll be on your side and you can hold, say, a kettlebell, and you can hang and let it bend you over. And then you're going to do the same thing. You're going to try and almost pull yourself up, but you're not pulling yourself up, if that makes sense. This is the version without that. So the one arm hang, you've got the arm up on the bar, I'm showing you in the video, and the feet kind of curved, like in a little curved half moon, quarter moon shape, whatever you want to call it, with the ground. And you're trying to drive your elbow down, almost like a pull up, and you're trying to bring that foot or the feet back towards the center too, almost like you're crunching. And that'll give you that oblique lat length and a tension in those as you do it. And then the fourth one, which Angus mentioned in the podcast, which you should listen to tomorrow, is the isometric barbell rotation. And this is the only one that's more of a pushing. So the rest would be classified as quote unquote yielding isometrics, where you're holding them. This would be an overcoming isometric, but you're not doing it trying to maximally, well, okay, you can do it trying to maximally almost like break the bar or push through the rack if you want to do it for rate of force development reasons. But if you're trying to do it for the reasons that we're trying to do the previous ones for, and really hold that long muscle length and get volume, you can push a little lighter and you can have the barbell stuck against the rack, and you can put yourself in a position that is a long muscle length, and you can create that tension and hold that. This one feels really, really nice. I will say you will feel, if you especially have tightness in your shoulders and chest and things like that, you will feel that up there too in your chest. So you really have to try focus on using your thoracic and trunk to create that rotation versus having it up top. Now, in terms of how you're going to do these, if you're a complete psycho, you do one set to absolute failure. If you can handle that. I doubt many people can. It is not fun. If you don't enjoy suffering as much, you can accumulate volume of say 60 to 120 seconds during a single workout or throughout a training week. So if you did the iso split squat and you're training twice a week, you could do 2 sets of 1 minute one day, 2 sets of 1 minute another day, as an example. You can eventually aim for a total of 5 minutes of time in those isometric positions, although this is just an arbitrary number and you could go less or more just depending on how you feel doing it. And where do they fit in your training program? Well, if you have tendon pain, do them at the beginning. If you're not going to failure, you can also do them at the beginning. If you're going to failure, I'll probably do these at the end of your training sessions. Again, you don't have to do all 4, pick 1 or 2, or whatever you're trying to achieve out of your training, whichever one fits, and you can start there. But give these a try. You don't have to do the full 60 seconds the first time. Just aim for 30 seconds, get the feel for it, and you can build volume from there. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please make sure to like, subscribe, share this. The channel is actually starting to grow a little bit. I think you guys are enjoying the content. And if you enjoyed this, please make sure to let me know down in the comments so I know I can make more things like this for you.